Hello, my friends. Let's have a discussion about the ego. Typically, the ego. Okay, hang on. I want to start this differently. Let's start this differently. The ego. Let's start it differently. There's a way that people normally talk about the ego, especially in the spiritual community, and it is definitely helpful for a part of our journey of knowing ourselves. And so I want to talk about what the ego is typically talked about, and then I want to talk about a possible reframe that I have come to find very helpful. So, the ego normally is talked about as the temporary character, the temporary identity of the mind. The ego is also talked about all of the beliefs or identities that are not true for us, meaning they are based in egoic beliefs. And there are really three main egoic beliefs. There is the belief in separation, that you are a separate self, that you are separate from everyone else and a higher power. The second belief is lack, that you could somehow be incomplete or lacking something, all right? Or that what you need or what you desire in your life is lacking, is not possible for you, that type of thing. And the third belief is in control, trying to control external outcomes for internal happiness. It'll never work that way. It doesn't work that way. Happiness has to be our choice. Happiness has to be our disposition. We have to come to a place within ourselves where we are genuinely happy with who we are because we know who we are, because we're authentic. But as long as we are identified with the egoic identity, we won't ever truly be satisfied and fulfilled. Certainly not for long, because any satisfaction that comes from one of those egoic beliefs is fleeting. It's there for a moment, and then you're on to the next thing. Because the reason that we are ever unhappy is because we're truly unhappy with ourselves. We're unhappy with the version we've created in our mind. We're unhappy with the stories we tell ourselves. And we're unhappy with the way we perceive ourselves and reality, and thus the world and others, because everything is a reflection of self. So even if you think the problem's out there, the real problem is always in here. The real issue, that thing out there, it might be troubling you. You may put your focus on it a lot. Let's say it's the government. All right, you put your focus on the government a lot and you're like, I hate Donald Trump, or I hate the Democrats, or I'm like finally things are gonna be right because Donald Trump got elected. And just all these egoic things. But was everything all better after Trump was president last time? No. So any happiness you had from that was fleeting, right? Just like anything that comes from this that you're happy about will be fleeting with that, because it's all ego. You're only happy if the things you want to see out in the world are the way you think they should be. And so your happiness is then based on something outside of yourself. Ego. Ego is like edging God out. And when we understand that there is only one source, one consciousness, one self, and we are all the one self, understand all is one. And if you do not have true happiness within, of knowing yourself, of loving yourself, Loving who you are as you are. Knowing that you are one with your Creator. Knowing that reality is beautiful. Knowing that if you have a friendly internal world, your external world will reflect that. That is the way to actual happiness. So we have to understand that there is this ego idea that is talked about so much, where it frames ego as the enemy. Ego is what I'm not. I have to fight against the ego. I have to put ego in its place. I have to argue with the ego. I have to battle with the ego. And for a while, it is like that, because we have given the ego such strong identity, and we have tied so much emotion to that identity, and that emotion is powerful within us. And if we do not practice discernment, we can start to become identified with those emotions and those identities, those mental ideas of who we think we are. But if they're temporary, or they're based in the past, or they're not really true for you right now, they're gonna cause suffering, because we're gonna be resisting what is. We're gonna be resisting our current self. We're gonna be resisting the new parts of self that are meant to come up as we're on this evolutionary journey. And if we distance ourselves from who we could become because we are so held on to this past identity, we create lots of conflict within us. And it feels like a war within us. It feels like a battleground. And it's you against the ego, the past against what is. Or your idea of what the future should be versus what is. All of this leads to suffering, unhappiness, dissatisfaction. And there is much to be learned about yourself and about life from going through this inner battle and learning to distinguish what thoughts or perceptions don't feel good to me. Because the things that don't feel good to me, those are the egoic beliefs and ideas. And if I choose to align with them and believe them, they become my reality. But if I want to free myself and feel good, if I want to feel good, and let me tell you, as an eternal being having a temporary human experience, you exist forever. You all have always existed, you will always exist. You do not have to suffer forever. All of life is not suffering. Anyone who says life is suffering, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's a part of life when you don't know who you are. But as we remember who we are and allow ourselves to be who we are and allow ourselves to receive the love that we are, that we give, suffering lessens more and more and more and can eventually become insignificant, if not completely obsolete. There are realities where people know who they are and they live freely and they enjoy themselves and they're happy and they suffer not at all, not really at all. And then there are more difficult stages of the evolution of consciousness, such as the one we're experiencing now, where suffering is actually the catalyst for our evolution. Because we don't know who we are. We're born here, we don't know who we are, we develop and create an ego. So understand this. The ego does not exist as a separate entity with a separate will. The ego, at the same time, is not separate from you in your experience, But what it is it is an extension of you, the eternal consciousness. It is a mental construct. And if we want to, we can start to identify the ego with the mind, the conscious mind. So the conscious mind and the ego can be one. And when we do this, we can understand that the mind is a tool, right? The egoic mind is a tool. If we define the ego or the mind as an enemy, as something to be fought, as something to be judged, as something to be battled, that is what it will be in our relationship with it. But, reframe, if you want the ego to be an ally, because what is the ego originally created as? It's a survival mechanism. If you have an identity, you feel safer, or you're taught that you need to have an identity, and you find comfort and safety in this identity at some point. And it also acts as a protector. It brings up something that it has identified, or you have previously identified, as a potential threat. Now, this can obviously be things that aren't dangerous at all. They could be social situations. They can be, which I know very well, they can be, your mom saying something to you. It can be a boss triggering you with something. It could be anything like that. And if the ego deems it as a threat, the nervous system, which is programmed through energy, and the energy is programmed by the way you perceive everything, when the nervous system has that programming, that feels triggered, all right? So the ego identifies the threat, the nervous system is triggered, and then the thought comes in that makes this feel like it's a life or death situation, even if it's absolutely not. And so if we want the ego to become an ally, we have to redefine it. Now, it can still be a protector of sorts. You can make your ego into a protector. Because understand this is a different way of thinking about the mind. You can think about the mind as the physical brain. Or you can think of the mind as being surrounded by you in your energy field. We all have an energy field around us, a big toroidal field around us. The mind can exist within that. It doesn't have to be so heavy and bogged down in the brain. We can think of the physical brain instead as more like an antenna. All it does is send and receive signals to and from the body, to the higher self, to Mother Earth. It's just an antenna, a sender and receiver of information. And so then we can understand that the mind, because thoughts exist outside of you. Thoughts are thought forms. They're energy that exist outside of you. So thoughts and what we call the mind, and even the egoic mind, can all exist just around you. Just around you. And they can be a tool. And so understand, you've got this energy field, right? Part of knowing yourself and setting energetic barriers, something I am learning to do right now, is trusting that you have protection around you. Now, understand, if you decide that you have a shield around you, a barrier of light around your energy field, and the egoic mind is now an ally that is responsible for protecting you, meaning that it acts as a filter. Instead of thinking it has to be running and narrating and thinking all day long and worrying about things, instead, let's give the ego something important to do something useful, something helpful, such as egoic mind, please be my protector and filter out frequencies that I do not prefer. Allow in frequencies that I do prefer. And I define what I prefer and what I don't prefer. Me, the consciousness. All right, because again, the egoic mind does not have its own separate will. You're in charge. You, the commander of this vessel, of this ship, of this sea of energy that is contained within your consciousness. You're the one in charge. So you can either define the ego as the villain, as a bad guy, and be judging this part of you that still exists in your experience and reality as a human, or you can make it into a powerful ally by forgiving the ego. Because the ego was always just doing what it was programmed to do. It's not an enemy. It's not trying to trick you. It's not trying to get you. It's not trying to get you to slip up. It's only trying to protect you and only ever has. It just wasn't taught a helpful way to be protective. And so instead we could say, hey, ego, be a shield for me. Be a protector. Shield me from the unhealed versions of my loved ones. I don't want to connect with those lower energies anymore. I don't want them to be a part of my everyday experience anymore. Protect me from those. Protect me from lower frequency waves. You know, it's like you can even do this with like the 5G phone waves that everyone freaks out about. I'm like, yeah, you know, they're a lower vibration, sure, than what might be ideal for me. So just ask your ego or your divine protection of your choosing. You know, you can do whatever you want, but be like, hey, I don't consent to these lower vibrations affecting me negatively. How about whenever they come in, they're transmuted into a higher vibration. They are crystallized by my state of being. Instead, when they come towards me, I transmute them into something more beneficial and harmonious with me. Basically, it's like, hey, ego, act as a shield, allow in what is harmonious to my natural preferred frequency and state of being, and keep out what is disharmonious. And then understand that anytime a thought does come passing through, if it does trigger an emotion, the emotion is just telling you, is this my truth? If it feels good, it can be aligned with your truth. It can be your truth. It is your truth. It is your highest truth. Or if the feeling doesn't feel good, then that thought that comes in doesn't have to be your truth. And you can disagree with it. You can just say, that's not my truth. I requalify with the opposite, or whatever my truth is instead. And this can also slow things down, because often we feel bombarded by emotions and thoughts and thoughts and emotions, emotions and thoughts and thoughts and emotions, the cycle that just continues over and over. And we get hit with a barrage, and then we get a little moment of breathing, and then we get hit with another barrage, and it's like, eventually we need some help, you know? Like, we need to realize we've got help that we can utilize if we so choose by being the conscious creators of our reality. And we are in charge of our own ego. We are the ones who created it. We are the ones who can change it, and we can change what it is used for. So it's good to understand what egoic beliefs and thoughts are and learn how to discern them when you feel them within yourself, whether they are true for you. You know, like an idea of feeling unworthy is obviously not true. It's gonna make you feel bad 100% of the time, as where a thought of being worthy is gonna feel good 100% of the time, because your emotions are intelligently designed. They are not mistakes. They are not lying to you. The thoughts or the beliefs may lie to you. Those are what we would call beliefs that are aligned with the egoic beliefs of separation, lack, or outcome control. And so if we want to change the way we look at the ego, change the relationship so that we can have a cohesive, harmonious experience of self, that is our right, that is our choice. but it has to be your choice. No one else can do it for you. You're the one who has to do the work to make that your reality. And that means having this conversation with the ego, with the mind, changing the way you define and look at it, and commanding it in a pleasant way. You don't have to be rude. Command it to be what you desire it to be. Command it to act in the way that you desire it to act. Command it to be used as the tool that is useful to you. Maybe you have a different idea of what you could do with it. Do whatever feels right to you. Do whatever resonates with you, because that's your alignment, that's your truth, and that's what's meant for you. So to conclude, the ego is not all bad. The ego is exactly what you think it is, exactly what you make it. The mind is exactly what you make it. No condition of the mind is permanent. There's actually nothing wrong with your mind, as long as you stop defining it as having something wrong. These are your choices. Choose wisely. Or don't, I don't know. But enjoy your journey either way. All right, I love you guys.